Introduce our first speaker today, Jay Smith, and he recently joined our club and is going to be giving his icebreaker speech. Welcome. Welcome, Jay Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is the single most important device or invention in the history of the world? Well, I submit to you today that it's symbols. We find symbols in ancient caves and ancient dwellings. We find them in our homes. We find them in our businesses. We find them in our minds. And these symbols come together normally to designate words. We use pictures, we use letters, we use numbers. And as time has gone by, the plethora of symbols in our life has gotten away from the simple meaning when they first started off. The letter A to ancient cultures meant a certain thing, and that letter within it had a whole history behind it. Well, as we've gotten more complex and we've moved on in our languages in the development of what we assume to be progress, we have forgotten the most important fact about symbols. And that fact is that the thing symbolized is always more important than the symbol itself. And so this morning I'd like to talk with you, or this afternoon I'd like to talk with you about the symbol of my life. So I would like to introduce myself, the symbol, and who I am as James Fort Smith III. I'm the oldest of four boys of J. Fort Smith Jr. and Sandra Smith. And as time went by, I became known as Jay. My grandfather went by the middle name Fort. My dad went by J. Fort, and so naturally I just became J. Well, I kicked against the goads and didn't like that, wanted to establish my own independence at a very early age, so I came up with J-A-Y, and that has stuck ever since. So you can call me Jay. James is a history that I don't recognize that much anymore, but anyway, I go by Jay. I'd like to share with you three stories from my life, two which are taken from the pages of history, and one which is from my actual life, that talk about the symbol of my last name, Smith. In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. And upon conquering Egypt, he set up a system whereby their ability to do commerce with other countries just expanded and moved nearly worldwide in the known world at that time. They began trading with all the countries around the Mediterranean Sea as well as most of Asia. Well, what's absolutely astonishing is that researchers found in a document called the Petrie Papyri. They've gone back and researched this out, and they have found this name Smith time and time again. This is from 227 BC. And not only in the document do they find the name, they know that he was from Britain. How he ended up in Egypt, I don't know, but I imagine that his calling in life had something to do with that. And this will have some humor tied in from last week. He was a maker and seller of beer. And so it's recorded in Egypt that there was a smith there, and he was involved in entrepreneurial pursuits. That excites me because I have an entrepreneurial bent to myself. Well, the second story, we jump to 1717. And Samuel Smith Sr. lives in London, and he's following in the footsteps of his father as a merchant and a banker. Well, he had received notice from an official that the Smith family had been granted a coat of arms to, quote, all male issue alike, unquote. And so everyone that came after Samuel Smith, which is my grandfather 10 generations back, everyone received, the male issue received the coat of arms. And it's absolutely stunning in its look. The symbology, the numbers, the insignia that's on it, it brings back all this idea of what symbols and what these symbols mean, and it takes far longer to explain the symbol than it is just to look at it and we know in our heart what it means. Well, the most important thing on that coat of arms is at the very bottom of it is a motto, and it says tenax et fidelis, which means tenacious and faithful. And so as I think back, there was an award given to my family for whatever reasons at the time. What it means to me is that my family had a tenaciousness and a faithfulness to their lives that was recognized by others, and thereby they were granted the coat of arms. The third story is personal. It's May 10th, 1990. and I'm in the hospital, Mother Francis Hospital in Tyler, Texas. And I'm out in the waiting room anxiously waiting the birth of my third child. I'd had 2 daughters. I'm, again, being the oldest of 4 boys, it was sort of expected that I would name my firstborn after me. Well, Providence had, and I didn't really particularly want to do that because there was all this family pressure. People were, well, my first child is a daughter, Kristen Noel. A little anxious, a little antsy. Second child, a girl, Courtney Grace. Well, on May the 10th, midday, there in Tyler, I had reached a point in my life where I wanted a son so badly, I would have given anything for it. And I was in the delivery room. We had gone through Lamaze together. And as my son was born, and I looked in his eyes, I decided to symbol him with the name James Fort Smith IV. And he has hence become Jay. So those 3 stories give an overview, basically, of what my life is like looking backwards, and as well as living right now and seeing a son that will take the symbol of his name and decide what to do with it. By the way, Jay IV has already announced at age 17 that his firstborn son will be James Fort Smith V. My youngest son, the last of the Mohicans, the girls are all grown and gone, Charles Russell has already stated that he would like to start his own tradition and have his own family begin building around Charles Russell Jr. We don't call him senior as of yet, but that will happen as time goes by. And so what I would like to challenge each of you with this morning, as well as myself, is that as we look at people's names out on the table in front of us, and we see the symbols of the insignia of the Toastmasters behind us, and we look at everything in life, I want to challenge you that our culture really has gotten away from what the meanings are behind a lot of our words. And one of the goals that I have in Toastmasters is to learn, and I'm sure with you, is to learn how to speak more effectively, more clearly, how to communicate, how to say in 1 minute what it might take 15 minutes for someone else, and yet that 1 minute has packed within it power and meaning, and it challenges people, and it motivates people, and it changes people to become better than what they were before they heard our speech or our talk. And then the next time we get to do it, we're built up even more. And that's my goal. I'm speaking my goal to you as far as joining Toastmasters with the leadership track as well as the communication track, that I want to be able to faithfully communicate and move further down the road with what I believe. And in closing, I'd like to leave you with this. The original Mr. and Mrs. Smith was a necessary, they vicissituted their name. And in case you didn't know it, their first names were Adam and Eve.